Welcome, everyone. If you're a newly minted instructor RN stepping into the classroom for the very first time, well, you are in exactly the right place. First off, a huge congratulations on taking this step in your career. Educating the next generation of nurse aides is incredibly rewarding. But as you probably already guessed, it also comes with a very specific set of guidelines. So today, we're focusing squarely on regulatory compliance. We're going to unpack Section 40 of the Nurse Aide Education Regulations. And hey, don't worry, think of this explainer not as some dry legal review, but really as a practical RN to RN guide to building your lesson plans the right way, right from day one.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start big with the big picture, move into a critical scheduling constraint we call the 24-16 rule, break down the 4 curriculum clusters, talk about unit objectives and behaviors, and finally do a little looking ahead. We are basically taking a top-down approach, moving from the macro regulatory stuff right down into your daily lesson planning.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the big picture. Before you write a single lesson plan, you've got to know your blueprint. The curriculum regulation outlines 12 specific content areas that every single approved program must include. And I want to be super clear about this right out of the gate. This list is the floor. It's not a suggestion. It's the absolute baseline of what has to be taught. Now, I'm only going to say this once because we're all professionals here, right? But as the instructor, you are the one responsible for ensuring all 12 areas are thoroughly covered and properly documented for the Virginia Board of Nursing. Ultimately, every schedule and lesson plan you create traces directly back to this foundational list.
Now, the regulation also mandates that your instruction can't just be you standing at the front of the room giving a lecture series. You've actually got to deliver your content through 3 very specific learning environments. We're talking the classroom for your foundational theory, the skills laboratory for that crucial hands-on practice, and finally, the clinical setting for real-world application. You really need this triad. Your students have to hear the concepts, then they got to practice them, maybe on a mannequin or a classmate, and then, finally, they apply it all with a real living client.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 24-16 rule. This is literally the most critical scheduling constraint you are going to face.
Let's talk about the number 24. Here is the absolute golden rule. Before a student has any direct contact with a client whatsoever, they must complete at least 24 total hours of instruction. No exceptions, guys. This is all about safety, establishing baseline competence, and protecting both the client and your student. You simply cannot rush them onto the floor. Those first 24 hours of your program schedule, they are fiercely protected instructional time.
But wait, it actually gets a bit more specific. Out of those initial 24 hours, the regulation tells us exactly how we need to spend the bulk of our time. Exactly 16 hours out of that 24 must be strictly dedicated to 5 foundational areas. So no, you can't just teach 24 straight hours of anatomy and call it a day. You have to hit these 16 hours of core competency first.
And here they are. These 5 areas are what drive the entire initial phase of your program schedule. You absolutely must cover communication and interpersonal skills, infection control, and safety and emergency procedures. And by the way, the regulation specifically calls out dealing with obstructed airways and fall prevention here, so don't skip those. You also have to cover promoting client independence and respecting clients' rights. Just think about it from our perspective as RNs. If a student doesn't know how to wash their hands properly, how to speak to a patient, how to prevent a fall, or how to just respect basic human dignity, well, they have absolutely no business being anywhere near a client yet. These 16 hours basically build that essential armor for them.
Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3, the 4 curriculum clusters.
Staring down a list of 12 mandated regulatory areas can honestly feel a bit overwhelming when you sit down to write a syllabus. So, to make it easier, we organize the curriculum regulation into 4 highly manageable clusters for teaching. And hey, remember, you have a printed reference map in your orientation packet, so please do not try to memorize every single subtopic right now. Cluster 1 is the foundation areas, which covers those exact 5 initial 16-hour core topics we just talked about. Cluster 2 is core clinical skills, and this encompasses your hands-on basic nursing skills and personal care tasks. Cluster 3 is the whole person, which focuses on individual client needs, managing cognitive or sensory impairments, and basic restorative services. And finally, Cluster 4 is rights, law, and professional practice, diving into the legal and regulatory aspects, occupational health, conflict management, observation and reporting, plus crucial modern issues like substance abuse and opioid misuse. See, grouping them like this makes it so much easier to translate the regulation into a logical progression for your class.
All right, moving to Section 4, Unit Objectives and Behaviors. We're zooming in from the big macro schedule, right down into your micro, day-to-day lesson planning.
So subsection B of the curriculum regulation is incredibly explicit about this. Objectives for each unit must be stated in measurable behavioral terms. Let's look at an example. A vague objective might say something like, the student will understand how to take vital signs. Well, as fellow RNs, we've all had students who claim they understand what a pulse is, but then they can't actually find one, right? You just can't measure understand. Instead, you need a measurable behavioral objective, which looks more like this. The student will accurately measure and record a radial pulse and respirations within a clinically acceptable range. Boom! You can observe that, you can measure it, you can document it, and that is exactly what the regulation requires.
Practically speaking, executing your unit objectives is a very strict two-step process. Step 1, you write every single objective in those measurable behavioral terms we just looked at. Step 2, you must review these objectives with your students at the very beginning of each unit. You have to tell them exactly what behavioral outcomes they are responsible for before you even start teaching. And I really want to stress this point. This isn't just a nice best practice teaching tip. This two-step process is a strict regulatory requirement for absolutely every lesson you will ever plan.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Looking Ahead. You made it! You now have the structural foundation of the curriculum regulation under your belt. You know the floor, the learning environments, the mandated hours, and how to write your objectives. Over the next 4 lessons of this Explainer series, we are going to take each of those 4 curriculum clusters we outlined and really break them down in depth. We're going to give you the exact tools to tackle the foundation areas, core clinical skills, the whole person, and professional practice. Before you jump to the next lesson, I want to leave you with this question. How will you map your first 24 hours of instruction to set your students up for clinical success? Seriously, I encourage you to grab a blank schedule right now, pull out that printed reference map, and immediately apply the 24-16 rule to your upcoming class schedule. Map out those 16 core hours. It is hands down the best way to cement everything we've just covered today. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the curriculum regulation, and I will see you in the next one.